Hermann Goring of Germany, was born on the 12th of January in the year 1893 in the small town of Rosenheim, Bavaria. How did this ambitious boy from a modest Bavarian background rise to command an empire's skies? What stirred his fascination with flight, turning him from a restless dreamer into a decorated hero? And how did the same passion that once lifted him to glory later pull him into history's darkest storm? Hermann grew up amid the green hills of Bavaria, the son of Heinrich Ernst Goring, a former colonial officer, and Franziska Tiefenbrunn, a woman of charm and determination. His childhood was marked by long absences of his father and the deep influence of his mother, who encouraged his independence and confidence. Though sent to a series of strict military schools, Hermann's heart was never truly in discipline. It was in the open sky. At an early age, he became captivated by tales of aviation pioneers. He built small gliders from wood and cloth, often risking injury as he leaped from hillsides in the name of flight. His teachers found him stubborn, even defiant, but undeniably gifted in leadership and physical courage. By his teenage years, Hermann dreamed not of the army's ground ranks but of the clouds above them. The dawn of the new century promised wonders of technology and speed, and for this daring young Bavarian, it would become the stage where destiny first called his name. When war broke out in the summer of 1914, Hermann Goring found his long-awaited chance to prove himself. He joined the Imperial German Army as an infantry officer, but his heart remained fixed on the sky. The muddy trenches of France only deepened his yearning to rise above the chaos. Before long, he applied for transfer to the Imperial Air Service, and his true journey began. At first, Goring served as an observer, peering down through the clouds to guide artillery fire. The work was perilous, demanding courage and precision, but Hermann longed to be the one at the controls. By 1915, after relentless requests and training, he earned his wings and joined the ranks of Germany's daring fighter pilots. The young aviator quickly developed a reputation for boldness and accuracy. He flew patrols in his Albatros and Fokker aircraft, often engaging in fierce duels with Allied pilots. His confidence grew with every victory, and soon he was celebrated as one of Germany's promising aces. By the final year of the war, Goring commanded his own fighter squadron, and after the death of Wilhelm Reinhard in July 1918, he was chosen to lead Jagdschwader 1, the flying circus. The honor thrilled him, but also placed a burden of expectation upon his shoulders. As the empire faltered below, Hermann soared above it, a symbol of pride and desperation in Germany's fading skies. The war's final months left Hermann Goring disillusioned and bitter. As German forces collapsed in late 1918, he watched his nation's defeat with disbelief. To him and many other veterans, it seemed impossible that an army which had fought so bravely could lose on the battlefield. In the years that followed, this disbelief hardened into the dangerous stab-in-the-back myth. The idea that Germany had been betrayed by its leaders and politicians, not defeated by its enemies. Returning home, Goring found a country in turmoil. The proud empire he had once served had vanished, replaced by the struggling Weimar Republic. Factories stood silent, soldiers begged in the streets, and resentment simmered across the land. Hermann, once hailed as a hero of the air, now felt adrift in a world that no longer celebrated him. He tried to rebuild his life through aviation, taking part in air shows and commercial flights. But deep down, he carried a growing anger, one that would later be exploited by men promising to restore Germany's glory. He began to meet fellow veterans who spoke of betrayal, revolution, and revenge. The young pilot who once chased clouds and honor was now drawn to a different kind of battle, one fought in rallies, speeches, and political movements. In those bitter post-war years, Hermann Goring's skyward dreams began to darken with the shadow of ideology. In the uncertain years after Germany's defeat, Hermann Goring sought a new beginning far from the ruins of his homeland. His fame as a wartime pilot opened doors abroad, and soon he found work in Sweden as a commercial aviator. It was there, amid frozen skies and aristocratic circles, that fate introduced him to Baroness Karin von Kantzow, a woman whose gentle heart and unwavering devotion would shape the next chapter of his life. Karin was already married and the mother of a young son, but she and Hermann were immediately drawn to one another. Their shared loneliness, admiration, and sense of destiny forged a bond that defied convention. In time, she left her husband, and together they built a quiet life filled with affection and adventure. Yet behind the charm and glamour, Hermann carried deep scars. The pain from the wounds he suffered during the failed Nazi coup of 1923 led to an addiction to morphine, a dependence that would haunt him for years. Periods of recovery were followed by relapses, and his erratic behavior often frightened those around him. Despite this struggle, Karin stood by him, offering loyalty and comfort when his mind and body faltered. Their love became both his refuge and his weakness, blending tenderness with tragedy. In Sweden's calm and isolation, the former hero of the skies battled his most relentless enemy, himself. By the early 1920s, Hermann Goring returned to Germany, a nation simmering with anger, poverty, and pride. It was there that he encountered a fiery speaker named Adolf Hitler, a man whose words echoed the resentment Goring had carried since the war's end. Drawn by Hitler's vision of national revival, Hermann joined the Nazi Party in 1922, convinced that this movement could restore Germany's lost honor. Hitler immediately saw potential in the decorated airman. Charismatic and disciplined, Goring brought military prestige and social charm to the party's growing ranks. Within months, he was appointed commander of the Sturmabteilung, the SA, the party's paramilitary force. Under his leadership, the once unruly street fighters were reshaped into a more disciplined, powerful force that gave the Nazi Party both visibility and intimidation on the streets of Munich. Karin often stood beside him during rallies, her grace contrasting with the fury of the crowds. She believed deeply in her husband's destiny and supported his loyalty to Hitler. For a time, Hermann seemed unstoppable, a man of action among dreamers, a war hero among radicals, but power and politics soon led him into dangerous territory. The same determination that had carried him through the skies now drove him toward conflict on the ground. As Germany's democracy weakened, the stage was set for the next great turning point, one that would test Goring's ambition, loyalty, and moral limits. In November of 1923, Hermann Goring joined Adolf Hitler and his followers in what they believed would be a bold march to seize power. The plan, later known as the Beer Hall Putsch, aimed to overthrow the Bavarian government and ignite a national uprising. As the crowd of Nazis marched through the streets of Munich, they sang, cheered, and believed destiny was on their side. But destiny had other plans. When police confronted the marchers, gunfire erupted. In the chaos, Goring was shot in the groin and severely wounded. The failed coup left 16 Nazis and 4 policemen dead, and Hitler was arrested shortly after. Bleeding and barely conscious, Hermann was smuggled out of Germany into Austria, where doctors treated his wound with heavy doses of morphine. What began as a necessity soon became a curse. During his recovery, morphine's hold deepened, clouding his mind and darkening his once bright spirit. He drifted through Europe in pain and exile, haunted by failure and the collapse of the movement he had risked everything for. Karin nursed him faithfully, refusing to abandon him even when his temper grew violent and his moods unstable. The would-be revolutionary was now a broken man, both physically and emotionally. Yet behind the weakness, the same ambition burned. Though crushed in defeat, Hermann Goring would soon return, not as a wounded fugitive, but as a powerful architect of a new and terrible future. Years passed before Hermann Goring dared return to Germany. His morphine dependence had taken a heavy toll, but with Karin's constant care and the slow healing of time, he began to rebuild his life. When political amnesty was declared in 1927, he re-entered the country determined to reclaim both his honor and his destiny. The old war hero and fallen rebel had found his way back to the stage of German politics. The Nazi Party, once shattered by failure, was rising again. With Germany's economy in collapse and anger spreading among the people, Hitler's words found new power. Goring, polished and persuasive, became one of the movement's most appealing public faces. His charm won over business leaders, aristocrats, and even ordinary citizens who admired his confidence and military past. Elected to the Reichstag in 1928, Goring's political career gained real momentum. He quickly became one of Hitler's most trusted lieutenants, known for his ability to negotiate, flatter, and command attention. His speeches blended emotion with showmanship, portraying the Nazi cause as the only path to national salvation. Behind the scenes, Karin's health began to fail, and Hermann's devotion to her deepened. Her death in 1931 devastated him, leaving a void that no title or power could fill. Yet even in grief, Goring pressed onward. The world saw a man of ambition, but beneath the surface was someone driven as much by loss as by loyalty to Hitler's dream. When Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933, Hermann Goring stood proudly at his side. Once a wounded fugitive, he was now one of the regime's brightest stars. Within weeks, he was appointed minister without portfolio and soon after, the powerful minister-president of Prussia, the largest and most influential German state. It was a position that gave him immense authority over police and security forces, which he quickly used to reshape the nation's political landscape. Determined to protect Hitler's new government from opposition, Goring established a special political police force in Prussia, the secret state police, or Gestapo. At first, it was designed to hunt down communists and dissenters, but it would soon evolve into one of the most feared instruments of repression in history. Ruthless, efficient, and loyal only to the Nazi cause, it gave Goring enormous influence within the new regime. He also reorganized the regular police, placing them firmly under Nazi control and blending law enforcement with political obedience. His power grew daily, and even his rivals in the party began to tread carefully around him. By 1934, Goring handed the Gestapo over to Heinrich Himmler, sensing that Himmler's cruelty could serve the regime's darker ambitions more completely. Still, the institution he had founded became a symbol of total control. The decorated pilot who once soared above the battlefields had now built a system that ruled from the shadows, with fear as its weapon. By the summer of 1934, tensions within the Nazi Party had reached a dangerous peak. The stormtroopers of the SA, once led by Ernst Röhm, had grown restless and powerful, threatening the army's loyalty and Hitler's authority. Hermann Goring, ever calculating, recognized the danger. Alongside Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich, he became one of the chief architects of the purge that would come to be known as the Night of the Long Knives. In late June, Hitler ordered the arrest of Röhm and other SA leaders. Goring personally supervised the brutal sweep, using the Gestapo and SS to carry out the killings. Hundreds were shot without trial, political opponents, rivals, and anyone suspected of disloyalty. Goring's office became a command center of death, where names were crossed off lists and fates decided in silence. When the violence ended, at least 85 people were dead, though the true number was far higher. Hitler later justified the massacre in the Reichstag, calling it a necessary act to protect the state. Goring's loyalty was rewarded with greater power, prestige, and the trust of his leader. The man who had once dreamed of glory in the skies now wielded power over life and death on the ground. The Night of the Long Knives secured Hitler's dominance and marked Goring as one of the regime's most feared enforcers. After the Purge of 1934, Hermann Goring reached the height of his influence. Hitler, now secure as Germany's undisputed leader, rewarded his loyal lieutenant with a new and ambitious mission: to rebuild the nation's air force. In open defiance of the Treaty of Versailles, Goring was appointed commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, the new German Air Force. It was the perfect role for a man whose heart had always belonged to the sky. Under his direction, the Luftwaffe expanded rapidly. Airfields multiplied, pilots were trained in secret, and modern bombers rolled off the assembly lines. Goring's talent for organization and his flair for presentation turned the Luftwaffe into both a symbol of national pride and a terrifying weapon of war. He boasted that his air fleet could crush any enemy, calling it the sword and shield of the Reich. Lavish and theatrical by nature, Goring adored uniforms, medals, and parades. He hosted grand air shows, surrounding himself with luxury and adoration, even as Europe watched Germany's rearmament with alarm. By 1939, the Luftwaffe stood ready for war, gleaming in power and confidence. To the public, Goring was the image of the modern knight, the hero pilot reborn as master of Germany's skies. Yet beneath the grandeur lay arrogance and overconfidence that would soon lead him, and the empire he served, toward devastating consequences. In 1936, Hermann Goring received a new mission from Adolf Hitler, one that would link economics to conquest. Appointed as the head of the 4-year plan, he was tasked with preparing Germany for war within 4 years. It was an enormous responsibility, giving him control over the nation's industries, raw materials, and economic strategy. Goring relished the role, styling himself as both statesman and strategist, a man reshaping Germany's destiny. He pushed for rapid rearmament, prioritizing steel, oil, and synthetic fuel production. Factories worked day and night to supply the army, navy, and Luftwaffe. Under his watch, Germany's economy became a war machine disguised as recovery. Workers were praised as patriots while dissent was crushed in silence. His policies created jobs and fueled national pride, but at the cost of freedom, fairness, and peace. Goring's arrogance grew alongside his power. He surrounded himself with luxury, wearing elaborate uniforms and collecting art and estates. Foreign diplomats described him as both charming and ruthless, a man who could laugh over champagne while signing orders for forced labor. By the late 1930s, Germany stood ready for aggression. The reoccupation of the Rhineland, the annexation of Austria, and the invasion of Czechoslovakia all bore Goring's logistical fingerprints. His ambition had helped prepare a nation not for prosperity, but for destruction. The countdown to global war had begun, and Hermann Goring was among its loudest architects. When war erupted in September 1939, Hermann Goring's Luftwaffe unleashed its full fury. In the early campaigns against Poland, Norway, and France, his air force proved devastatingly effective. German bombers and fighters dominated the skies, supporting rapid ground victories that astonished the world. Goring, now Hitler's designated successor, basked in glory. He was celebrated as the architect of Germany's modern military power, confident that no enemy could challenge his creation. But pride would soon meet reality. During the Battle of Britain in 1940, the Luftwaffe faced the Royal Air Force in a relentless contest for air supremacy. Goring promised Hitler swift victory, boasting that his bombers could destroy Britain's defenses in weeks. Yet the British endured, fighting back with courage and radar-guided precision. The Luftwaffe's losses mounted, and by autumn, the campaign collapsed. The dream of conquest gave way to bitter defeat. As the war spread eastward, Goring's confidence faltered but never disappeared. He continued to assure Hitler of success even as the Luftwaffe struggled against Soviet resistance and Allied advances. Increasingly detached from reality, he spent more time at his lavish Harrenhal estate than in command centers, indulging in art, hunting, and luxury. By 1943, his influence began to wane. The skies over Germany darkened with Allied bombers, and the once proud air fleet was crumbling. The hero of the early war was now blamed for failure, as the tides of battle and fortune turned sharply against him. By 1945, the once mighty Reich was collapsing under relentless Allied assault. Cities lay in ruins, the Luftwaffe was shattered, and Hermann Goring's prestige had all but vanished. Once Hitler's trusted heir, he now found himself isolated and distrusted. As the Soviet army closed in on Berlin, Goring retreated to his mountain residence at Obersalzberg, hoping to preserve his life and perhaps his title. In April, with Hitler trapped in the capital, Goring sent a carefully worded telegram asking for permission to assume leadership of the Reich should the Führer become incapacitated. It was meant as a gesture of loyalty, but Hitler took it as an act of betrayal. Furious, he stripped Goring of all titles and ordered his arrest. The man once seen as the empire's future was suddenly branded a traitor. Under guard by the SS, Goring was humiliated and broken. His vast wealth and power meant nothing as Germany crumbled around him. When the Americans captured him soon after, he surrendered without resistance, dressed in fine clothes and carrying a suitcase full of medals and morphine tablets. The war he had helped ignite was over. For Hermann Goring, the days of command, ceremony, and pride were gone, replaced by the cold uncertainty of captivity. The once golden face of Nazi power was now a prisoner of the world he helped destroy. After Germany's surrender, Hermann Goring became the most prominent Nazi figure still alive. Captured by American forces, he was transported to Nuremberg to stand trial before the International Military Tribunal. The man who had once been second only to Hitler now faced judgment for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and waging aggressive war. Yet even in captivity, Goring carried himself with arrogance and showmanship, believing he could still control the stage. During the trial, Goring's intelligence and confidence surprised the judges and prosecutors. He defended the Nazi regime passionately, refusing to accept moral guilt. In long speeches, he claimed that everything had been done for Germany's strength and survival. For a time, his defiance even impressed some observers, but as evidence of mass murder and terror unfolded, his words rang hollow. Psychiatrists studying him found a man of contradictions, disciplined yet addicted, intelligent yet delusional, utterly loyal to Hitler yet obsessed with his own image. As testimony from concentration camp survivors and Nazi officials filled the courtroom, Goring's composure began to fade. In October 1946, He was found guilty on all major counts and sentenced to death by hanging. The verdict sealed his fate, but not his control over it. In the silence of his cell, Hermann Goring began to plan one final act, one last gesture of defiance against the world that had condemned him. On the night of October 15th, 1946, just hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Goring cheated the hangman. Hidden within his cell at Nuremberg, he bit down on a concealed cyanide capsule and died within minutes. How he obtained the poison remains a mystery that still invites speculation. Some claimed it was smuggled in by a sympathetic guard, others that Goring had hidden it in a secret compartment for months. Whatever the truth, his death robbed the world of witnessing his public humiliation. His final hours revealed a man determined to preserve control even in defeat. He dressed carefully, wrote letters to his family, and expressed no remorse for his actions. In his last note, he declared that he chose to die as a soldier, not as a criminal. It was the final performance of a man who had spent his life chasing power, image, and illusion. When guards found his body, he was lying neatly on his bed, his medals arranged nearby. The other condemned men were stunned, the Allied jailers furious. Even in death, Goring had managed to turn the world's gaze back to himself. He was cremated, and his ashes scattered into the river Isar to prevent any grave from becoming a shrine. Hermann Goring, war hero, tyrant, and showman, left behind a legacy of ambition corrupted by power, and a name forever etched in the darkest pages of history. What do you think about Hermann Goring of Germany? Was he a brilliant aviator, a man whose courage and daring once inspired a nation to dream of the skies? Or was he a tragic figure, consumed by ambition, blinded by loyalty, and forever tied to one of history's darkest regimes? Was his legacy a story of greatness corrupted by power, or of a man who mistook control for destiny? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story gave you new insight into the rise and fall of those who shaped history, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales of ambition, consequence, and the human struggle behind power. Thank you so much for watching.